Bienvenidos a Disrupt Everything, podcast series by Isra García. Reinvéntate a ti mismo y cambia lo que más te importa.
Socrates insisted that there is a strong connection between your philosophy, how you interpret the world, what you think is important in life, and your mental and physical health. Different beliefs lead to different emotional states. This is a quote of our next guest. But before going to who is our next guest, welcome to Disrupt Everything podcast series. Quite literally, the term philosophy means love of wisdom. In a broad sense, philosophy is an activity people undertake when they seek to understand fundamental truths about themselves, the world in which they live, and their relationship to the world and to each other. For Seneca, philosophy was above all else a source of guidance about how to live, and also his philosophical reflections deal, for the most part, with highly practical issues that are as relevant today as they were when he first wrote them. Cicero, quote by Montaigne, quotes, "To study philosophy is to learn to die." Heraclitus said, "Thinking is, as referring to philosophy, is a sacred disease." And Heidegger, an extraordinary inquiry into the extraordinary. And Michel Foucault said, "What is philosophy after all, if not a means of reflecting on not so much what is true or false, but on our relationship with truth? How, given that relation to truth, shall we act?" And today, we have a philosopher for life. He quotes, "The journey beyond the self is not as safe or predictable. On the other hand, staying in the self also has its risks: boredom, stillness, sterility, despair. Ultimately, there is something in us that calls to us, that pulls out the door. Let's find out where it leads." Jules Evans is our next guest here in Disrupt Everything podcast series. Our next international guest, Philosophy for Life. Jules, thank you for being in Disrupt Everything podcast series.
Thank you, Isra. Looking forward to our conversation.
Let's go then for the intro, and then let's get our hands dirty.
Disrupt everything. Explora los márgenes o muere.
Jules Evans, writer, speaker, and practical philosopher, interested in ideas and practices which help beings suffer less and flourish more. He's a prolific and insightful writer. His first book, Philosophy for Life and Other Dangerous Situations, explored how people are rediscovering ancient Greek and Roman philosophies, and how Greek philosophy, particularly Stoicism, inspired cognitive behavioral therapy. It's since been there. He published this book, being published in 19 countries, and was a Times Book of the Year. His second book, The Art of Losing Control, explored how people find ecstatic experiences in modern Western cultures. It was published in the UK in May 2017 and in the US in September 2017, and has also been published in Holland, Spain, Russia, and Italy. In 2019, Jules published a little book on ayahuasca tourism called Holiday from the Self. And in 2020, a book he edited and published, it was a book about spiritual emergencies called Breaking Open. Jules is also a very productive researcher. Philosophy Clubs has been funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. He's involved also in modern Stoicism and in a Stoic Week project. Also, he has received press coverage everywhere from Newsweek to New York Times and has helped to instigate the revival of Stoic philosophy in modern culture. He co-organized the first Stoicon in San Diego in 2010 and two subsequent Stoicons in London, and also contributed to the Stoicism Today essay collections. He's also a fellow at Wellcome Trust-funded project called Living with Feeling at the Center of History of Emotions, Queen's Mary University of London. He is researching the story, philosophy, and philosophy of well-being and how different cultures define and seek human flourishing. He wrote a report for the World Health Organization on Cultures on Well-being, and one of his projects was researching spiritual emergencies, as we addressed before, moments of spiritual awakening which involve temporary psychosis, and has also researched the life and work of Aldous Huxley, writer of Doors of Perception, and he's, among other amazing books, and his vision for integrated education. You can find Jules Evans on TEDx with How Philosophy Saved My Life, and in publications as Financial Times, The Times, Aeon, The Guardian, The Spectator, and Wired, to name a few. So, Jules, with this prolific resume and work-life career, my first question is, if you were to put all your life in a timeline and you were about to name your top milestones and life-changing experiences, what would you say were the most relevant?
Okay, let's have a think. I don't know, there are certain moments that are the most dramatic, the most obvious turning points, but everything kind of builds up and has its own momentum as well. What can I say? I mean, I was sent to a boarding school when I was 13. That's incredibly formative. Like, an English boarding school is so formative to the people who go through it. It's such a strange experience as a kind of cultural shaper. You're basically, you go away from your parents and you live among, it was an all boys thing. So like, my friends from that time are still my best friends. And we did lots of drugs as well. We were kind of bored in this boarding school. So we got into my year at that school, got very into drugs. And that was very formative for a lot of us in good and bad ways. But the bad ways were, it messed up quite a few of my friends and me. So I had some bad trips on LSD when I was like 17 and 18, which hurt my mental health and hit my psyche. And that was very formative. And then I'm just going to give two more kind of landmark things. Mm-hmm. I then managed to I had post-traumatic stress and social anxiety for about 5 or 6 years, from the age of about 18 to the age of about 24. So that was the most difficult time of my life. And I got better thanks to two things, which we can talk about if you want. One was a strange near-death experience I had when I was 24. And I mean, like, in very, very brief, Isra, like, I had a kind of bad skiing accident and fell off a mountain. And when I hit the ground, I had a kind of white light encounter, which I don't pretend to understand. Basically that experience said to me that what was causing my suffering was not neural chemistry. That's what I was very afraid of. I was afraid that I basically permanently damaged myself with these drugs I'd done as a teenager. And there was nothing I could do about it, that it was out of my hands. That was that. And what I got from this strange experience was this insight that actually what was causing my suffering was my own beliefs. not my scrambled neural chemistry, but my beliefs, and that I could let go of my beliefs. My belief in particular that I was broken and therefore I was doomed to have a terrible life. I realized that that belief was basically like a lead weight around my feet, and that I didn't have to hold that belief anymore. I could let it go, that I was actually in some sense okay. I was fine. I was loved and well. And then the second thing that helped me get better was the same thing, basically, kind of cognitive therapy and Stoic philosophy, which are both based on the same idea, that what causes our suffering is often our own beliefs, and we can change those beliefs. And for the Stoics, they thought this was a golden capacity, the capacity to reprogram ourselves, to reprogram our habitual beliefs. So obviously, that near-death experience and then discovering Stoic philosophy were profound experiences in my life. So since then, I've kind of carried on exploring, thinking, looking for how ideas can make our life better and worse. But probably it all started from that. It all started from that strange experience, and then subsequently from discovering Greek philosophy and realizing how philosophy was not just an abstract academic discipline, but was actually a kind of spiritual journey.
And how did you reprogram your beliefs? What techniques, or what the advice guide did you follow to do that?
Well, the first thing that happened to me was not really conscious or rational. Like I said, this near-death type thing was it was a profound experience, or you could say an encounter with a kind of, I don't know, white light of like loving intelligence. And that enabled me to let go of certain beliefs. You could compare it, I guess, to some kind of mystical or spiritual experience, or maybe some kind of psychedelic experience. If you're listening to what you're talking about. So this kind of mystical or spiritual experience enabled me to let go of old beliefs, my old beliefs that I was damaged, that was forever, there was nothing I could do about it. And it gave me a deep sense, an intuitive sense that there is something in me that can't be broken, that can't be damaged, like call it the soul, if you want. After that, to get to your question, what happened was that this epiphany, for a few weeks and months, I felt so great. I felt so well, completely regenerated, completely in love with humanity, completely in love with life. But then the old habits of depression and anxiety came back, because as you know, we are creatures of habit, and habits can be very ingrained. So then with cognitive therapy, sorry, yeah, go on.
No, I was saying it's true. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. So then that's why I looked to Stoicism and to cognitive therapy, because I realized I needed practices and techniques to take this useful and wonderful and liberating insight, but to turn it into new habits. I needed techniques to build habits. So I can tell you that in CBT and in Stoicism, the techniques I found super, super, super helpful. First of all, this basic technique called the Socratic Method, which is when you feel a powerful, difficult emotion, rather than just being completely lost in it and lost in the story and carried away by the kind of automatic soap opera, you use the technique that Socrates taught people, which is you ask yourself questions to practice a kind of cognitive distancing. You say, what is the judgment or opinion or belief that is causing this emotional drama? and then you hold up this thought or belief to the light and examine it, and you say, okay, so let's say I'm feeling super anxious. Why am I feeling so anxious? Okay, because I've got this judgment in my mind that this person I met, they don't like me. They think they dislike me for some reason, and that is awful and unacceptable and catastrophic. And then you hold up this belief and you say, is this belief definitely true or wise? Where's the evidence that this person dislikes me? Have I checked it out? Have I sometimes misinterpreted this kind of situation? If I know for sure that this person dislikes me, is that definitely a big deal? Am I making too much of this situation? Maybe I can just accept that for the time being. Maybe I can still like myself even if this other person doesn't. So this kind of, Socratic reflection can be helpful for people. It was certainly helpful for me. Understanding, like Stoicism teaches, as the idea that our emotions are connected to our beliefs or opinions. Epictetus taught people are disturbed not by events, but by their opinion about events. So we don't necessarily have control over things out there, over external events. And we can feel very out of control and the slave of fortune if we fixate over external things that are beyond our control. Like, for example, what does this person think of me? What do these people think of me? Or, how successful am I? All this kind of thing. The more we fixate over those things beyond our control, according to Epictetus, the more we can feel helpless, paranoid, the slave of circumstances. But at any moment, we have the capacity to actually focus on what is in our control, which is our own beliefs, our judgments, our opinions. I can't control other people's opinion of me, but I can control my opinion of myself, whether I'm being true to my values, whether this kind of thing. So that technique is extremely helpful. I also learned from Stoicism and from cognitive therapy, techniques for building habits. Techniques like the maxim, which is a Stoic habit that CBT uses. Stoics teach it's not enough to have an idea just once. You need to repeat it over and over until it becomes ingrained. In CBT and cognitive therapy, they talk about your self-talk, which is like your automatic monologue that goes through your mind all the time, just constant kind of internal mental chatter, and that very much shapes your emotions. So it can be useful to go, to just repeat certain philosophical ideas. And the Stoics, their teachings are full of these little maxims, which are little philosophical sayings. Like, for example, Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor in Stoic philosophy, he says, life itself is but what you deem it. So it can be useful to repeat that to yourself. Or like Seneca, the Stoic sees all adversity as training. It can be useful to repeat that idea to yourself. Or I don't know, like Seneca also says things like, why drag up suffering from the past? Just, focus your attention on the present moment. So when I was recovering from anxiety and from post-traumatic stress, I would write down maxims in a little handbook, which the Stoics called enchiridions. And I would carry this around with me. And I would, if I was feeling stressed, I would look at this little handbook and repeat certain maxims and remind myself of the wisdom that I was trying to embody. Another technique is the Stoics say at the end of the day, find a quiet place and write down in a journal, what have you done that day? What have you done well? What have you done badly? Try to keep track of your progress. Epictetus says, if you have a bad temper, count the days on which you have managed not to lose your temper. And if you get to 30 days, then consider that you're making progress. So this is useful as well, like just trying to keep track of your spiritual and moral progress. And then finally, I think a very useful technique is about trying to change not just what you think, trying to change your behavior, trying to change what you habitually do. Epictetus says, you may be very good at philosophy in the lecture room, but go out into the street and you're hopelessly shipwrecked. So for me, when I had social anxiety, it wasn't enough just to say to myself, it's okay if other people don't like me, I can still accept myself. That was useful, but I also needed to go into social situations, like make myself go to parties, even when I felt extremely shy. And then when I'm at those parties, make myself go and start conversations with subjects. This is what, the Stoics sometimes call eschasis. It means like training. And the object was not necessarily to have the best conversation ever, because that's something that's slightly out of my control. That depends on the other person as well. The object was merely to face my fear of talking to strangers. And I would beginning were pretty awkward, but that didn't matter because I'd done my homework. I'd achieved my goal, and I could go home and say, yeah, well done. You did it. You faced your fear. And now tomorrow, try again. Or ask a stranger in the street something. Just in other words, pushing back your automatic fears or sadness or so on. And standing up to your belief. You might have sometimes automatic negative beliefs. This is what they talk about in CBT. They talk about your automatic negative beliefs, your ants, and how the ants can bully you and say, oh, don't talk to that stranger. It'll be terrible. And your feelings might tell you, don't do it. It's going to be awful. And so you stand up to it. You stand up to the bully, and you go and talk to that stranger. And guess what? It's no big deal. Who cares? And gradually your fears lessen. Habitually, gradually your fears lessen. And then by the end, you can go and talk to someone you don't give a damn. You couldn't care less. I could talk to you. I enjoy talking to you. I don't have any anxiety around it. So this is, I think what the Stoics tell you and what I've realized is true is people underestimate the extent to which we can change through applied habitual effort. Epictetus says there is nothing more changeable than the psyche. But you don't necessarily change overnight. You've got to just bit by bit, 30 minutes a day, do some practice, do some homework, practice your maxims, practice your field work, or like maybe meditate for 5 minutes or something, or do loving kindness meditation for 5 minutes, but do it every day. And then month by month, year by year, you can change beyond recognition. This is not to say, I still sometimes feel anxious. I still sometimes feel sad, but I don't have mental illness anymore. My anxiety is just normal human anxiety. My sadness is just normal human sadness. So this is why I'm very, very grateful to philosophy, really, that it has really given me my life back. Because any of your listeners who have mental illness know how awful it is, when you have crippling depression or crippling anxiety. Life is really hard. Every day is really, really hard. So I'm so grateful to Greek philosophy for helping get my life back.
How are you coping right now with adversity or with stress or with anxiety? So yeah.
I feel like what I've learned that I didn't know in my 20s, and like I didn't know, and I didn't really get it from Stoicism or from cognitive therapy. What I've learned in the last few years, probably more from things like Buddhism, is being more aware of my body and of my physical reactions. and more able to notice when I am anxious, when I am angry, when I am stressed. So I think I've become a bit more self-aware of my body. And then when I'm feeling that, not getting freaked out by that, but being able to kind of regulate my body a little bit, like just say with breathing. So I was in a meeting this morning and I noticed I was quite stressed and I was a little bit triggered by this meeting and by the topic. And I just could notice that and breathe and accept it. So I think I've got a bit better at managing my somatic reactions. I think, I suppose also what I'm learning a bit, like Stoicism is very good for dealing with what you are feeling within you. So let us say intrapersonal anxiety, that kind of thing. But it doesn't teach you that much about the everyday negotiations of interpersonal relations, how we interact with others. I feel like I also, you know, when I had anxiety, I dealt with it by learning. I had social anxiety, okay, which is feeling very anxious about what other people think of you. And I dealt with that by becoming very stoic. By stoic, I mean very self-reliant. Epictetus teaches things like, don't depend on others. Don't have any attachment to external things, including other people. If you're anxious, overcome all attachment and aversion to externals. And so I did that. I became like a little citadel of rationality. But that was a bit lonely. I was a bit of a lonely stoic, and I felt I needed to keep on growing. And part of how I needed to grow was actually to learn to depend on others more. So to become slightly less self-reliant, slightly less independent, and more okay with interdependence, more okay with relying on others. Because I had to get over, I guess, what you would call attachment issues. In other words, I had to get over a sense that other people could not be trusted, that other people maybe didn't really like me, that other people wouldn't be there for me in difficult times. So I have had to learn, and I'm still learning in the last few years, to trust other people more, to depend on other people more, to depend that, if I'm in a hard time, I don't have to go through that on my own. I can reach out to other people and say, I'm sad at the moment. That is very hard for me to do. I went to boarding school for one thing. At boarding school, you learn to be self-reliant. And then secondly, I was a stoic. You super learn to be self-reliant. So for me, it feels still a bit shameful and pathetic to say to someone else, I am sad. I am lonely, this kind of thing. That feels still a bit pathetic to me as a man as well. But I'm learning to be able to do that, to be able to say to my best friends, I'm sad. I need to talk to you. Do you know, I went through school and university. For 5 years, I had really bad mental illness. And sometimes I felt suicidal. And do you know how my friends and family, or particularly my best friends, do you know how they found out about that? They found out about it when I wrote about it in a newspaper. And they said to me, my God, we had no idea. Why didn't you tell us? So this is the weird thing. And maybe it's a weird English thing. But I couldn't tell my friends that I'd gone through this terrible time until I'd gone through it, until I'd come out the other end. So now I think I'm better at saying, look, to my friends, I need you, which is a very unstoic thing to say.
What is what are the most important lessons that you get from writing your own book? First, Philosophy for Life, and then The Art of Losing Control, and then Holiday from the Self, and then from Breaking Open. What do you extract? What are the lessons the key lessons you take after writing those books that were with immense knowledge and wisdom?
Well, so let's take Philosophy for Life first. This is a book about how people use ancient Greek philosophy today. So I talked about how Stoicism had helped me, but I also found a lot of other people around the world who'd used Stoicism, Epicureanism, Platonism, skepticism, and use these philosophies to try and live by these philosophies today. Like a guy who used to be in the mafia, and then he came across Plutarch, the Roman philosopher, Greek philosopher, while he was in jail, and he was very inspired by Plutarch. Or another person who was, he was a policeman with an anger issue, terrible anger issue in the US, and then he came across Seneca and he used Seneca to deal with his anger. So I feel like it was a good book for that reason, because it just told these stories of people who'd used Greek philosophies in their life. That came out, it'll be a decade ago next year. And when it came out, Stoicism was quite an obscure philosophy. I remember when I went to the first gathering of Stoics for 2,000 years, which I helped to organize. I helped to organize this in 2010 in San Diego. And there were like 10 people came along, and my friends thought it was very eccentric. I said, I'm going to San Diego to meet with some Stoics, and we're going to celebrate the birthday of Marcus Aurelius. We even baked the cake. And said, happy birthday, Marcus. And my friends thought this was pretty strange, quite eccentric. Like saying, I'm going to the park to meet some Pythagoreans, pretty eccentric. But now, 10 years later, Stoicism is so popular. Everybody's into Stoicism. Every week, there is an article about Stoicism in a different newspaper or magazine. There are Stoic groups, there are Stoic podcasts. So I am happy about this. I am happy because I feel like I played a role in this. Though now, I don't write about Stoicism really anymore. I write about other things. So I'm not really part of the Stoic movement anymore, but I'm still proud of the role I played in its revival, because I really think the revival is extraordinary. Do you know what I saw this week? This YouTube and this gamer, this one of these people on YouTube who play computer games and then talk about it while they're doing it. The most famous, he's called Pewdiepie. Have you heard of him?
No, never.
He is the most famous. He's got, 10 million followers or something. And he did an episode about Epictetus. Unbelievable. This is some, gamer. And he did a whole episode on his Twitch channel or whatever, on Discord and on YouTube about Epictetus. And this is incredible. It's gone so mainstream now. And that is only good, because particularly for men, he would never make it. I mean, maybe he would, but on the whole, men can be quite turned off therapy. But we need some self-knowledge, self-care, and Stoicism is less off-putting for men a lot of the time, including, men are at risk of suicide. We do what I do. We don't talk about our problems. So Stoicism is I'm really happy about that. I'm really happy that Stoicism has become better known. what have I learned? What's my takeaway? It's just, to me, it's amazing that it keeps on growing. And I guess what I learned is that exactly what I thought is like, people want meaning. People want values to live by. They want philosophy to live by. They want virtues to be true to. They want meaning. We are in a meaning crisis. And I think that is why people look to something like conspiracy theories, which is what I've been writing about for the last kind of 12 months, all through this pandemic. Conspiracy theories have become super popular because people need meaning. They need something to kind of make sense of these crazy times, these disruptive times. And conspiracy theories are an attempt to do that. But I think there are much better ways to do that, like through philosophies like Stoicism or Buddhism. So that is ask me another question. Otherwise, I feel like I'm just talking too much and banging on and being boring. So,
any quick essential lessons from the other books you want to touch briefly?
Okay, sure. I mean, The Art of Losing Control was it was about how people find ecstatic experiences in particularly in Western culture. The argument of the book was that all humans seek self-transcendence. We seek ways to go beyond our ordinary everyday ego. Because it is boring and claustrophobic to be stuck in our little egos. So we seek ecstasis. I know you've had, what's he called? Stephen Kotler.
Stephen.
On your podcast. So he also did a book that came out the same month as mine about, stealing fire, also about that, about ecstatic experiences. We seek ways to go beyond our ordinary ego. The thing is that in Western culture, because of the Enlightenment, because of the scientific revolution, we pathologized mystical experience, particularly psychiatry. Secular psychiatry said mystical experiences are pathological. They are delusional. They are a symptom of mental illness. As a result, there is a taboo around the ecstatic. There is a taboo around spiritual experience. People are afraid of it. People are afraid to go beyond their ordinary ego and to go into like non-rational states, like trance states, ecstatic, mystical states, psychedelic states, because they're worried they will go crazy and they won't be able to go back into their incredibly complicated Western ego. So that is the kind of legacy of the Enlightenment and of 20th century psychiatry. However, on the other hand, since the 1960s, things have changed. There was an explosion of ecstatic practices back into Western culture from the 60s onwards, whether that be forms of Eastern meditation, whether that be psychedelic drugs, whether that be things like rock and roll and, experimental cinema and theater, and of course the sexual revolution. So then I would say the subculture of New Age spirituality, and within the subculture of ecstatic Christianity, there is much more openness to ecstatic experiences, and even a kind of hunger for them, a greediness from them. I don't know what, maybe to some extent you are in Western, I don't know about your beliefs, Israel. Like my beliefs, my culture, I identify with like Western spirituality. I consider that my culture to some extent. And within that culture and within like psychedelic culture, as you know, maybe there is like even a kind of greediness for ecstatic experiences now. People will travel the world, like to the Amazon jungle, to find, to get out of their heads. They will spend thousands to go on retreats or to go to an Anthony Robbins course or to, get hold of some DMT or to walk on coals or to go into a sweat lodge, and we can go from ecstatic experience to ecstatic experience. And I noticed this in my own life. I noticed a kind of bipolar type cycle. I would have an ecstatic experience. I'd feel flooded with meaning. I'd feel amazing. And then gradually it wore away and I kind of floated back to the ground like the air going out of a balloon. And then I'd feel a bit bored, and then I'd feel a bit depressed. And then I'd go and try a different kind of ecstatic experience. Maybe I'd like a Vipassana retreat, or I don't know, some kind of, whirlwind romantic relationship. Or I'd go on, to Landmark Forum or something, or the Hoffman technique or something. And then I'd feel amazing again and ecstatic, for a few weeks, and then it go round and round in this kind of cycle. So anyway, I guess the conclusion of the book is we need a more balanced, integrated relationship to the ecstatic, where we recognize that it is an aspect of our spiritual life, but it is not everything. It is not the end or goal of a spiritual life. It is just something that happens along the way. But it does not mean that you are God. I mean, not exactly. It does not mean that you are better than everyone else. It does not mean you are one of the elect, one of the special ones, one of the spiritual elite. Because often when people have an ecstatic experience, they get very spiritually inflated. And they start to think they're better.
That's true, man. That's so true.
Yeah. Have you come across that in Santa Teresa a lot?
Yeah. Well, I'm in Santa Teresa, but guess what? I come in from Tulum, man. So you can imagine, Tulum is the kingdom of this. That's everyone is on a really they think or they believe they are in a real high spiritual state of whatever they want to they are,
that their shit smells better than everyone else's.
Yeah, man. And all shit when it's good always sticks, right?
Yeah, right. So look, I like the writing of Daniel Pinchbeck, who lives in Tulum. Daniel Pinchbeck writes interesting stuff, and his book Breaking Open the Head was a really interesting book, and I like the guy. But look at his journey. Look at his journey. He does lots of psychedelics and he gets a bit famous, and he decides that he is the reincarnation of Quetzalcoatl, the reincarnation of a Mexican god, and that the universe and the human race is about to go through some quantum shift to a higher level of consciousness at a precise date, the 12th of December 2012. And he's not alone in that, by the way. Lots of other New Age hippies and psychonauts believe that, including Terence McKenna, I believe. And, it's this kind of, so there's spiritual inflation and there's this kind of apocalyptic thinking you can get into. These are all the kind of risks of ecstatic experience when you can lose your critical discernment. And I say that not to have a go at Daniel Pinchbeck, because it's kind of a full-on journey to go through. You declare that you're a Mexican god. I mean, how do you come down from that? So I'm just using that as an example, because you being in Tulum made me think that. But
yeah, it illustrates what the vibe is. Yeah, what is going on in the world in this. Before wrapping up, I want to ask you two questions and then the rapid fire questions. I know we have a very tight schedule. It was amazing content, amazing. I had like 6 pages already. So first, how psychedelics have shaped your life? And how they shape your life, and what has give you that has what are the pros and the cons?
I mean, I suppose psychedelics when I was a teenager gave me the strong sense that there is a spiritual reality to life, and that there is a kind of there's so much more to life and to reality than I could understand, but that it is a kind of spiritual reality. And then the bad trips I had gave me a sense that our minds can be heaven or hell. And therefore we need to learn how to take care of our minds, because otherwise we can really be in hell. I mean, properly in hell. So in a way, those bad trips started me on the road to writing about psychology and philosophy. I'd probably done something completely different with my life otherwise. Who knows? Then, like I wrote this book about going and trying ayahuasca in the Amazon, this book, Holiday from the Self. And it was a very interesting experience, fascinating. But, I had like a spiritual emergency after it, because as I expected it to do, it brought up trauma and it brought up powerful dissociation, probably remnants of my bad trips from when I was 18. The thing is, right, that the ayahuasca brought up all this trauma and all this dissociation, not when I was on the drug and at the retreat, but afterwards, for like 2 weeks afterwards, when I wasn't any longer on the drug.
That's powerful. What you're saying is so powerful, because people doesn't address these issues when they talk about psychedelics. Sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah, I had no idea. I thought I might have difficult experiences on the drug, but then I would come down. So I had some slightly difficult experiences at the retreat, but basically I left that retreat feeling absolutely great and wonderful. And then when I was back in reality, back in what was it? Well, I can't remember the name of the place now. The town in the Amazon. All this dissociation and trauma came up, and I'm talking about powerful dissociation. So I then decided that I was either in a dream or in some kind of afterlife bardo. Bardo, like from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Like I was in some kind of limbo afterlife, because I thought this is what happens when you're powerfully dissociated. You can think, this isn't real. I'm not in, it's called derealization. It's a psychological thing. So I was like, I'm not in reality. This is a dream or like limbo. And, luckily this time around, I asked friends for help. I didn't bury it. I didn't repress it. I didn't run away and hide. I asked my friends for help. And luckily I've got very wise, helpful friends. And they took care of me when I didn't know what was real or not. And they gave me a lot of love and support. And that was incredibly healing. And I came back down. After 2 weeks, I was back down in normal reality. But for those 2 weeks, that was a temporary psychotic experience. And I think what it did was it taught me really firsthand that mystical experiences, including psychedelics, can be messy, and we need sometimes help to integrate them. And that we need as a culture to improve our cultural understanding of the mystical and the ecstatic, and our cultural support for people who have difficult mystical experiences. Because what's happening now, Isra, is millions and millions of people are doing yoga. Millions and millions of people are doing meditation. Millions and millions of people are doing psychedelics, and even more are going to be doing psychedelics in the next 10 years, because this is a huge market now. $6 billion invested in this market. When I was in where you are, when I was in Santa Teresa, I went out one evening. I met 5 psychedelic investors all at the same restaurant, and one guy who runs a psychedelic retreat, and they sat around talking about, you know, stage 2 investment for their, and I could not believe it. I was like, wow, things have changed. So millions and millions of people are having mystical experiences, and millions more are about to have them. But at the moment, we don't have very good cultural understanding of mystical experiences, and we don't have very good support services. I wrote an article a few weeks ago saying, how about if investors who invest in mindfulness, which is, you know, let's say a $4 billion market with all these apps and so on, what about if they invested 1% of that capital in services to help people who have difficult meditation experiences? What about if everyone who invests these $6 billion in psychedelics, what if they invested 1% of that to support people who have difficult psychedelic experiences, and so on? So this is, I mean, we as a culture collectively need to just learn, I don't know, wisdom in terms of how we relate to the ecstatic, so that we don't fall prey to things like narcissism or paranoia or conspiracy theories. We didn't get onto this topic, but I've written a lot, and I, you know, if your listeners want, they should check it out. My articles on Medium, the platform Medium. I've written a lot about this topic, conspirituality, which is the overlap between conspiracy thinking and spirituality. And there's lots of articles. I've been writing about it for the last 12 months, including.
We'll make sure we put the Medium and your Medium website in the podcast show notes.
Great. So this is I guess my main feeling at the moment is to try and take care of my culture, which is, you know, which is Western spirituality, to try and protect it against certain, its shadow side, its dark side, which is things like attendance, you know, like helping people if they get into difficult spiritual experiences, helping protect people from cultishness, from abusive gurus, from a tendency to spiritual narcissism or spiritual elitism, from a tendency towards illiberal or authoritarian politics. So this is the work that I'm trying to do at the moment.
Beautifully said. Really virtuous approach, like a Stoic virtuous approach. Yes. And so I'm gonna go with the rapid fire questions. If it's a really quick questions for ending up the podcast. I have I think we could go on and at least 2 or 3 hours, but let's go for a round 2 in next month. Perhaps when we see each other in Costa Rica or somewhere else.
Sounds good.
So I'm gonna fire the questions. So first one is, what book have you read the most?
Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. I was so into that book when a friend of mine died of an overdose. I even put it in his. I kind of left a copy of it on his grave. I don't know why. It was. Wow. I guess it was quite irrational looking back on it. But it was one of my best friends, and he died of a heroin overdose. And I just thought, somewhere or other, I thought this might be helpful to him.
Wow,
I don't know.
powerful.
So yeah, this book, I've read that book so many times. Yeah.
What is the article that you remember or you recall that has had impact on you recently?
Recently? Can I say not recently?
Yes.
I can think, okay, so the journalist Tom Wolfe, I was very inspired. When I was younger, I wanted to be a poet or a novelist, and I wasn't able to do that. I wasn't good enough. But Tom Wolfe, his journalism, he wrote like a book called The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. He invented this kind of literary non-fiction. He called it new journalism, and his articles really inspired me. They showed that you could use all the skill of being a writer, but you could use that in journalism and be funny and be descriptive and anthropological. And he wrote one of my favorite books when I was a teenager, which is The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, which was all about Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters and that whole psychedelic scene in the 60s. So his articles were a huge influence on me.
A podcast that has been useful for you?
I mean, one I listen to so often is it's a BBC podcast called In Our Time. And every episode, they pick a different topic and they get 3 experts to talk about it for 30 minutes. It could be Aristotle, it could be Copernicus. This inspired me, by the way, I started a business a year ago, a new kind of business line for me, which is doing like philosophy tutoring. So basically, clients hire me and the client picks a topic for each week. That could be a philosopher, an idea, a movement. I go and research it, and then we do a Zoom session where I kind of teach it, and then we discuss it and talk about it. And I really enjoyed doing this over the last year, during lockdown. And I've got different clients.
We'd love to share the link so we can put it also in the show notes if some readers are interested.
Yeah. So that I got inspired by this podcast, In Our Time, to do that.
Is there any film or documentary that has been thought-provoking for you these days?
I mean, the last one I watched was the Netflix documentary about Michael Jordan called The Last Waltz. The Last Dance.
Yes.
And I really enjoyed that during lockdown. And I suppose what it shows, I mean, I've taught Stoicism in professional sports. I was the in-house philosopher for a champion, the best rugby team in Europe, a team called Saracens. And I used to go there and teach them philosophy, including Stoic philosophy. And so I'm a big fan of sports. And I guess watching that documentary made me realize that being an elite athlete is not necessarily the same as being a good person. Because Michael Jordan is kind of a very hyper-competitive narcissist. And that's kind of what makes him an exceptional basketball player. But he's not necessarily a good person.
The habit the most powerful habit that you know?
Oh, the most powerful good habit that I have?
Yes. Yeah. Or that you have, or do you know?
I mean, for me, the most powerful habitual technique I know for regulating my emotions, and I don't know if that's exactly what you're asking. Is like slow breathing, like breathing, like 5-7 breathing. Breathe in for 5 seconds, you breathe out for 7 seconds, or you breathe in for 7 seconds and you breathe out for 11 seconds. I use that all the time. I use that when I'm playing sport and I've lost my temper, like if I'm surfing and I get into a very negative frame of mind. If I do that slow breathing technique, it really incredibly improves my surfing. Or same when I'm playing tennis, or if I'm getting annoyed in a meeting, or if I can't sleep, that technique is so helpful for me.
The skill that you consider critical in 2021, what would it be?
Learning to tolerate ambiguity and discomfort without giving way to over certainty without holding on to a belief too tightly, because we are in an age of disruption and uncertainty. And because it's scary and confusing and complex, people try to collapse complexity into very simple narratives. And then they get very attached to it, like racial narratives or nationalistic narratives or crazy conspiracy theories, and so on. And so being able to tolerate ambiguity and uncertainty is, I think, really useful right now.
A tool that you cannot live without?
I love, I mean, one of my core personality traits and values is curiosity. I love learning and trying to learn each day. I love reading. I really love it. Like, that is my happy place. Just like learning and reading and feeling like I'm learning something new. And I guess I have the capacity to absorb a lot of information and then synthesize it. And this is probably my key skill. Like one of these whale sharks, and they just sail along. No, basking shark, and they got their big mouths open and they just absorb plankton. So I'm like that with information. I've got my big mouth open and I'm just absorbing information, and then I synthesize it. And so I think that is my core skill.
Your best failure?
Oh, my best failure. Well, okay, my best failure. What do you mean?
What's the failure that has brought you the most success?
Okay. I mean, I guess harming myself with drugs when I was 18, like messing myself up with drugs. Everything else came from that. Everything else came from that mistake. And it took, and for a while I thought I'd destroyed my life and that was that. But really everything came from that.
And your worst success?
Oh, worst success. I suppose I was a narcissist and a big head when I was younger, because success came very easy to me as a child. So from the age of about 10 to the age of about 18, I think I became a narcissist and a big head. And then, I had quite a fall from that. So I would say just like the kind of easy success that I got when I was a teenager, I got a bit full of myself. I kind of, thought I was pretty great, and then that really messed me up.
Who do you recommend me to interview next?
Okay. Well, listen, my favorite writers would be like John Ronson. I think, he wrote a book about conspiracy theories 20 years ago called Them. And that book is so prophetic. And he hung out with Alex Jones from InfoWars, and they kind of they broke into the Bohemian Grove secret society together. And now Alex Jones is such a kind of major figure in American politics. So John Ronson, I think he would be a great guest.
Thank you.
I would also, another obscure one just quickly is a writer called Jeffrey Kripal. Jeffrey Kripal is an amazing writer about modern religion and spirituality. So Kripal, I'd say to your listeners, look out for his books too.
And last question here is, who will be the 5 persons that you will include in your team, dead or alive?
What kind of team? What's the
like,
competition that the team is?
Yeah, I was good. Let's say your A team, your live team.
Okay.
So they say that you are average of the five
okay.
person you interact the most, right?
Right. Wow. I mean, look, I got to say the Buddha. His teachings are. I don't know if that's what you mean, or
I love it. I love it.
Inflated, but like the Buddha, he's like to me, he's the greatest human that's existed.
He nailed it.
And then Socrates, and then Stanley Kubrick, David Bowie, and Pema Chodron.
Can you repeat the last one? Sorry.
She's an American lady who became a Tibetan nun. She is called Pema Chodron, Pemachhodron. She's the only one of them that's still alive. She's 90 and she teaches up in Canada. And her books really helped me. I guess in the last few years, I've been in a kind of midlife crisis. And her books have been very helpful for riding the waves of anxiety. So Pema Chodron.
Jules, what would be so if you were about to launch a message to anyone listening this podcast and you were to launch a headline, what will be yours?
Well, if someone is listening to this and they are experiencing loneliness or anxiety, depression, if they're suffering from mental illness or addiction, and they feel like they're in hell, the message I would say is like, hang on, things get better. There is help out there. There is help in ancient wisdom. There is help in our friends and in other people. And so things get better. And I remember being in very, very dark place where I could not imagine my life getting better, but they did. And now, life is enjoyable. So people come through hell. That is my message.
Where people can find you on the internet?
My website is philosophyforlife.org. On Twitter, I'm Jules Evans 11. On Instagram, I'm Jules the Philosopher. And on Facebook, I'm Facebook.com/philosophyforlife.org, I think, something like that.
Jules, thank you so much. Do you have any question to the listeners?
What is the first thing you're going to do when lockdown ends? Yeah, let me know. Send me a message on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. Let me know what are you most looking forward to doing when this goddamn virus is under control.
You said, for Aristotle, friendship is in its highest form as a political or civic dimension. We love our friends, not just because we like each other or are useful to each other, but because we share the same values and ideals for our society and come together to advance those ideals. Jules Evans, thank you for making the time, for giving everything you got, or at least going after past the 45 minutes we agreed. Thank you so much for being part of Disrupt Everything podcast series and being a disruptor, being a philosopher disruptor, and enlighten the path to a lot of people, and adding a positive impact in the world, because at the end, this is why we're here. Thank you so much, Jules.
Likewise, Isra. Thank you so much. Enjoyed our conversation.
Well, you had Jules Evans in the Disrupt Everything podcast series, a very, very, very rich interview with a lot of action points, pain points, everything that you can use, at least use one thing to make your life, your day improve a little bit, like drop by drop. This is why we're here. This is what it means to live in a permanent state of reinvention. So go ahead and disrupt everything. Disrupt yourself, because not, you will be disrupted, and this will be more painful. And don't forget to subscribe, download the last podcast, this one, and leave a review in your favorite platform. You are being disrupted. Thank you so much. I'm Isra García, and this has been Jules Evans.
Esto ha sido Disrupt Everything by Isra García. Encuentra el riesgo antes de que el riesgo te encuentre a